Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Many thanks for coming along and joining this, what I think is an important discussion. This is hosted by the Centre for Ageing Better, and it's part of a series of webinars that we're running, The Road to Recovery. And particularly today, we're thinking about designing and building new homes and trying to incorporate some of the lessons that we've learned from the COVID pandemic. My name's David Orr. I'm an Associate Director with the Centre for Ageing Better, where I advise and support on the Centre's work on homes and housing. I'm being joined this morning by three very distinguished people to assist in the conversation. We have Julia Park from Levitt Bernstein, Daniela Adamo from the Clarion Housing Group, and Mike Dempsey from Legal and General Modular Homes. Many of us, I think, have understood that the lockdown has meant that we've had to rethink the relationship that we have with our homes and what we do in our homes, what we expect to be able to do. And for those of us interested in ensuring that all older people can live good and fulfilling lives, having homes that meet those requirements is absolutely critical. So the new homes that we build are really important to ensuring that we have homes that are safe, adaptable, accessible, and where we can all remain in contact. There are a number of issues that we're likely to discuss today, and in the immediate aftermath of the Prime Minister's speech yesterday about build, 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 we may wish to consider some of the comments that he made about investment in housing and some of his thoughts about planning. The rules of engagement, we all have become very used now to webinars and how these things work. Those of you who are watching this, we will not be able to see or hear you, but you will be able to see and hear us. You will, of course, be able to participate, and I hope that you will participate by making any comments that you have in the chat box, and more particularly by using the Q&A box, which is probably on the bottom of your screen, to ask questions of the panelists. So I think without further ado, we'll crack on. And first speaker I'm going to invite is Julia Park. Julia, thank you.
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I'm an architect and head of housing research at Levitt Bernstein. We've got offices in London and Manchester, and about 2/3 of our work involves housing. I've been an architect for many years, and I'm very lucky. I split my time between designing, research, writing, and more recently, campaigning, and all of that involves housing. My particular interest in housing for older people stems from 2009, when we in PTE Architects, Pollard, Thomas and Edwards, were appointed to work on what became known as the Happy Project. It was commissioned by the Department of Health and what was then the Department of Communities and Local Government. You're probably familiar with the series. I think there are 5 reports now. It was design focused. It involved taking a panel of experts to visit the best examples of specialised housing we could find in Northern Europe and reporting back. I learned a huge amount personally and professionally from that experience. And I think the report that came out of the research has been influential and a bit of a wake-up call in a subject area that had been ignored for far too long. So almost a decade later, it was very exciting to be invited to write a book about the future of age-friendly housing by the RIBA. And it gave me an opportunity, I co-authored it with Jeremy Porteous of the Housing Lynn, and it gave us an opportunity to sort of see how things have moved on here as well as in Northern Europe. And it was mostly good news. We found that the best new developments here stand up very favourably with those that we saw in Europe 9 years ago. There are many more options and choices now for older people here, and not only for the wealthy. but we need thousands more. There are still huge gaps across the country, and mainstream housing is, I think, nowhere near where it needs to be in terms of meeting the needs of people of all ages. I don't think, certainly in my lifetime, that the importance of good housing has ever been more obvious. Lockdown has been a testing time for all of us, hasn't it? But so much worse for people trapped in poor or cramped conditions, or those with no access to open space. COVID has been a timely reminder to all of us that many older and disabled people spend most of every day in their homes, even in normal times. And I think that's a very sobering thought for us all. We can and we must do very much better in mainstream and specialised housing and in care homes. And it's frustrating in many ways that many of the things we value most are very easy to do. We just don't routinely do them. It doesn't take much to turn a home that creates daily barriers into one that works better for everyone and enables older people in particular to remain independent for longer. And that's just so important. But these important features are still optional in the building regulations, which just seems crazy to me. Experts, we're facing climate change challenge as well. Experts seem to agree that any home we build today should last at least 200 years. If that doesn't focus the mind, I don't know what does. Just imagine the variety of households and individuals that will inhabit those homes over that period of time, and how things will change. So it's absolutely critical that as we build, in the words of our Prime Minister yesterday, we also build better. And that means better for people and better for the planet. As I said, most of it isn't expensive or difficult. And even the bits that are need to become normal. Frankly, there isn't a sensible alternative anymore. So it doesn't make sense to carry on with business as normal and just do it faster.
That's great, Julia. Many thanks for that. We're going to pick up on a whole range of these issues as we go through. And just before I pass over to Daniela, can I remind you that there is one further way that you can participate in this conversation, and that's by using Twitter, where our hashtag is Road to Recovery. So please feel free to involve any thinking that you've got that you want to share with the world by using Twitter. Daniela Adamo is Senior Development Manager on a huge regeneration project in Merton for the Clarion Housing Group, which is the biggest housing association in the country. Daniela, you're very welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. I will share my slides now. Can you see them?
Yes, we can, Daniela. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So at, sorry, I'm having problems with my screen. Okay, that's better. At Clarion, our age-friendly mission is to enable people to age well in our communities, and we want to contribute to positive aging. And in order to do so, we need to, we have a duty to consider how COVID-19 has impacted on our residents. We are shaping our strategy post-COVID, and we are starting by building on what we know already. So we know, for example, that 32% of our households are led by a resident aged 55 and above. And our residents have told us that they want to feel in control, they want to be able to manage uncertainty, and they want to be supported in their own homes for as long as possible. We are now gathering information from our residents about their experience of the pandemic. And this year, as part of our annual index survey, we are asking them about their experience of COVID and how their work and about their work and how this has changed, and if they think their homes will be suitable for the coming years. The results of the survey will provide us with a snapshot on how our residents' behaviours and their values have changed due to the virus. We will need to reflect on this data and insight, and we will shape our strategy based on those findings. And we will have the results, the early results in August, and we will publish a report in the autumn. So what we know already is that the lockdown has changed our sense of place. We have spent, and we will be spending more time at homes, and our homes will suddenly feel too small or too big if we live on our own. And having a private outdoor space has become vital. So social distancing has also ironically drawn us closer together than ever before, because we strengthened our sense of belonging. And relationship with neighbours, practical support and community solidarities have strengthened during the lockdown. So those intergenerational connections are there to stay, and they will make us feel safer as we grow older in our neighbourhoods. We will feel safer, however, money worries have increased. COVID-19 has generally impacted on our income levels, and staying at home for longer implies higher energy use. So how can design respond to this? We will need larger homes with dedicated space to work from home, a flexible space that can be used later on in life for a carer to stay, for example. We need good natural light, we need energy efficient homes, and we should also include elegant, dementia-friendly design and the ability to plug and play technology. Access to a decent-sized private space has become a must for our well-being. We should also aim to introduce semi-temperate environment so that we can allow residents to enjoy the outdoors all year round. But above all, we should look at our public spaces, and we should design active and engaging environments with walkable routes where people can meet, where they can come together feeling safe, and we should create opportunity for intergenerational interactions. But all of this comes to at a price. So we have estimated the additional space will increase the cost by a minimum £15,000 per home, depending on the size. And this assumes an increase in space to a size of a wheelchair accessible home. So the additional square meters will provide enough space to accommodate a proper sized desk or give us room for exercise or for adaptations later in life. This £15,000 excludes the extra cost due to zero carbon homes, which we think will have a further £20,000 to £30,000 per home. It also excludes the reduction in density, because building larger homes and outdoor space means building less homes. So we also need to be mindful that house prices are dropping and sales rate is lower, and therefore this will all have an impact on viability in the short and medium term. So what are the possible solutions? I believe we should move away from looking at capital cost only and look at the financial performance throughout the life of the building. In the long run, housing provider will save money on adaptations or management resources. We should also be lobbying the government, the GLA, for extra funding. An increase in independent living will save the public purse millions of pounds in social care spend every year. We should therefore consider adopting design and specification for all homes and neighbourhoods to be age-friendly in order to provide longevity of product and also flexibility for all ages. Thank you.
That was great, Daniela. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
If you could unshare your screen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. One very interesting comment that you made there about social distancing. I must say, I think it's been unfortunate that we have described physical distancing as social distancing, when all of us have been doing our very, very best to maintain social connections. And I think one of the learning points from COVID is the importance of having different mechanisms for retaining social connections, even when we are physically distant. Thank you, Daniela. That was great. Now, we're now going to move to Mike Dempsey, who's the Business Development Manager at Legal and General Modular Homes. Many of us have believed that there is a huge opportunity for modular homes to make a real contribution to resolving some of these very challenging issues. So, Mike, I hope you're going to tell us that you are indeed the answer.
Thank you, David. I hope so. I think just a reflection on a couple of things. So firstly, you mentioned obviously the Prime Minister's speech and the emphasis on, I think, speed of delivery, which modular delivers. This is a real issue, obviously, in terms of traditional methods and the things that we do not delivering fast enough. So modular is definitely a solution to that. And I think the other real benefit of modular is quality, because you're able to have a detailed quality control process that in a factory, which delivers better quality. And I think there's been some real challenges of delivering volume. Volume tends to mean that quality suffers in all industries. We probably see that in lots of different products, that we live in a much more kind of fast and throwaway society. I think that the challenge is, how do we build up volume and how do we deliver quality, which I think modular is able to do. But I think the other important thing was the thing that Julia touched on, is that we can't keep doing it in the same way. And so I reflected on the impact that COVID has had and looked at really the parallels, which again Julia touched on, between spending more time in our homes and the parallels that elderly people already experience. And I've looked at really, I think, that the importance of space, the importance of again, quality. So actually, if we're living and spending more time in our homes, are they robust enough in terms of wear and tear? I think that's never really been looked at long enough, and we need to look at that as well, because it's not just the impact on people, but it's the impact on homes. And again, coming back to quality, the importance of community, and I think also the importance of technology as well, that without technology we couldn't do this. And what part can technology and innovation play, particularly for elderly people, in terms of care and in terms of communication as well. And I've also really reflected on where the focus has been and how we do need to change, picking up again on Julia's point. And I think the focus in the development world has been very much on density and cost and numbers, and not enough focus on people and listening to people and listening to our customers. I think because of the pressures on delivery, the pressures on land and the planning system, we tend to focus on delivery and not people. And actually this experience means that we need to listen to people and learn from that. And the whole thing will improve as a consequence. And I think as a consequence of having the wrong focus and not listening to people enough and not listening to our customers, we've almost developed a sort of we know best rather than engaging. I'll give you an example of that on a regeneration scheme, where rather than consulting with people first, we present what we think they want. And this happened to be an area of housing for elderly people. And rather than saying, what would you want, we came up with a proposal that showed living space, day-to-day living space at the rear of their properties and a communal area. And when they saw it, they said, well, no, actually, we'd like to be at the front. We want to see what's happening in the world, not all sitting to talk to one another. We like to look at what's happening. Simple things like that, because we don't listen. So I think that sort of brings us on, again, to things that Danielle has touched on about community as well. Community has clearly been sort of reinvigorated, and I think in terms of design, we need to really think about community and as I say, move away from the focus on density and numbers, and we really need to plan not just our homes, but with new developments, how they're going to work, so that we have true multi-tenure, we have homes for all ages, and that we can create community and we can create space. I think we really need to start listening to people and looking at this differently, because if we don't, we'll just be repeating the same problems and not really solving any of these problems. So going back to where we started with, building more, building faster. Yes, there's a great opportunity to do that, but we've got to do it properly. And we need to take all of those things into account and learn the lessons that COVID has taught us around quality of space, quality of environment. We need to look at how robust properties are. We need to look at certainly energy, which other people have touched on, but not focus entirely on that. So we may have energy efficient properties, but they need to be good places and healthy places to live. So for me, we're doing a lot of these things already, but for me, I think the lessons are to listen to our customers, to learn from this experience and apply it to everybody, but in particular, I think there's a lot of parallels with how elderly people live.
That's terrific, Mike. Many thanks for that. And you've in a way set up the next part. We have a very short, I think 2-minute video, which is an outcome of some work that the Centre for Ageing Better has been doing with Ipsos Mori on people's lived experience during the time of the coronavirus lockdown. And it's, as you were saying, Mike, it is completely critical that we start by listening to what people want. So let's play the video, folks.
This is the garden of my house, and this is where I spend a lot of my time with my husband. We've spent many hours since lockdown tending the garden, and it's looking really good.
You're indoors here, and we've got the doors that fold back, and you can go out and sit at the table in the shade, or you can sunbathe here. We do schoolwork over at that table and eat in the evening if the weather's good.
We've got a small courtyard garden. We've got some potted plants and veg that we're growing here, so a little bit more space, we could grow a bit more, I guess.
This is the view that I get from my house when I open my front door. So it's really quite pleasant.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful sight. This is why I love living where I do.
This is where most of the work is going on, here in the kitchen, and here's the toilet and little sink, and we will be having a partition built around that.
Been doing some upcycling, and this is the cabinet that I'd upcycled. Anyway, I took the doors off, repainted it, and I think it looks rather nice.
Ceiling's falling down. My mental health is suffering because I don't know what I'm meant to do. Waiting and waiting for the kitchen to be fixed, the bathroom to be fixed. I just want it to be nice.
What I'm liking about the lockdown scenario in my home is at least it's summer, which makes it warm. In the winter it's really, really cold.
I have found that the house is getting me down a bit because it feels too cramped, too small. There are 3 adults and 3 dogs in a small 2-bedroom cottage.
We sat round the dinner table, we chatted again, all 5 of us, sat round the dinner table chatting for about another 2 hours after we'd eaten. So yes, very, very pleasant company. Normally we do sit around dinner table and eat, and then within 10 or 15 minutes we've all left the table, but we've been doing some long sitting and chatting, so it's been absolutely wonderful.
Great, fascinating insights there, which again will be underpinning the rest of our conversation. Perhaps I might just say that a colleague, Henry Smith, is here from the Centre for Ageing Better. Henry might just give a little wave because I think he is visible. And his job is to help me to make sure that we cover as many of the questions that are coming in. And you will have spotted there are already some very interesting and thought-provoking questions that have started to come. But to kick things off, I'd just like to ask all three panelists just for a quick comment on yesterday's prime ministerial announcement, the build, build, build approach. Do you think, did you spot anything in what he said that you think will help, or any things in what he said that you think are likely to be problematic? Julia, why don't we start with you?
Well, there's no denying that we need more housing, and there's no doubt that that needs government investment. Whether it's enough money, I'm really not sure. I mean, it's scanty details, isn't it? It all feels very rushed. And to be honest, it's more worrying than comforting to me at this stage, and I hope that changes. We've been very vocal critics of permitted development rights for office to residential conversions. It's led to quite literally some of the smallest and worst housing we've ever had in this country. So plans to extend that rather than curtail it are deeply disappointing. And I don't, you know, the sense is it's all about speed and despite the rhetoric, not nearly as much about quality. Yes, I really hope I'm wrong.
Yes, so do I. Can I ask, amongst all our participants, people who are watching this, if any of you would like to make a case for permitted development and think that the way that offices have been converted to residential accommodation has gone well, please use the chat box, because it would be very interesting to hear comments from people who have got some knowledge of that. Mike, what do you think about the Prime Minister's speech yesterday?
Mixed feelings. I think always obviously encourage that there's an emphasis on housing. I mean, we've had this for a long time, a so-called emphasis on housing, but I think there's still a lot that we've got to fix, and we've been talking about some of those things this morning, and that we can't just focus on speed and delivery. We do need to talk about quality. I think personally there are still a lot of issues with the planning system. So again, we've been here before and we've talked about it, but I think there needs to be much greater engagement between all of us and government. I think there's a lack of communication there. So great to have lots of ambitious talk, but there needs to be real engagement across the industry with government agencies, and there needs to be an understanding by government, I think, of what the challenges are and how we can solve this together. To me, it still feels like a them and us, and that there is a lack of understanding. And we do as much as we can as an organisation to influence and have those discussions, and there's some good dialogue, but I think there are still some very big barriers. So encouraged by the talk and encouraged by the ambition, but there's a lot to solve to actually deliver. So I would be more encouraged if we can start to talk to government in a better way and increase that understanding of what those challenges are and how we solve them.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. And again, feel free to use the chat box. There have been one or two comments coming up about how to see the chat and Q&A sessions. I think you just need to click on the chat or Q&A sign at the bottom of your, or wherever it is on your screen. But if that's not the case, I'm sure Aging Better's technical support team will be working on it. We've had some fascinating questions coming in. I'm going to paraphrase and put one or two of these together. But Peter Monk has sent in a question saying that asking residents what they want is great, but the limitation is that we are constrained by what we think is possible. And not many of us know how poor quality our homes are. Not many of us know that we seem now to be building the smallest new homes in Western Europe, although strangely enough with the biggest number of bedrooms. So how can we help people to be more knowledgeable and more articulate about the things that they're looking for? And if we can add to that question, the comments that many people, including Daniela in her presentation, made about space. People do want more space. How do we ensure that we can incorporate that in a way that's cost effective? And is the upfront cost worth it in terms of future longer term savings? So perhaps, Mike, is there a modular answer to some of those questions?
Well, I think there are obvious restrictions with space with modules, because the actual design of a module is really determined by being able to deliver it on a lorry. So anything that's built in the factory has that sort of restriction. So there are constraints there. I think again, sort of going back to government, we have space standards that only apply to certain parts of the industry, and we need to have space standards that apply to the whole of the industry. And I think, again, going back to that, how do we engage with government? I think government needs to understand that, and it needs to be a level playing field. And we as an industry need to focus and talk to one another to make sure that we can deliver on space, because it's not a level playing field at the moment. So I think government's got a big part to play in that. And then going back to modular, I think, I mean, all of our homes exceed national design space standards. But I think, we've really got to think carefully about the design of that. So modular can play a part. I think the importance of modular really is about speed of delivery and quality, but we mustn't lose sight of space either. So yeah, there are some constraints, but for me, it's the part the government needs to play in creating a level playing field.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mike. Daniela, Clarion in Merton is doing this right now. You're trying to build as part of that huge regeneration project to bigger space standards. Can you tell us a little bit about how that is going to be paid for, and what kind of response you've had from people in Merton to the proposals that you've got?
Well, it's not easy. We are building to larger space standards, but then that comes at a price, as I was mentioning, minimum £15,000 per home. But also, it's what is difficult is creating working in partnership with the local authority and the GLA and the government in general, in terms of them buying into this concept of the larger homes are better for everyone. At the moment, the emphasis, and again, in the Prime Minister announcement yesterday, the emphasis is very much on numbers of homes. So this bill they will count the number of homes, and obviously larger homes means less density. So it's a struggle. We can do this in large regeneration projects, and on those projects, going back to what Mike said, we know what residents want, and we work with residents in co-design. So we not only we start from what they want, but also we work with them on designing the homes, and we show them what is possible. On mainstream development, it's a bit more difficult, especially when we are measured on the number of homes we deliver. So there is probably, as the largest housing association or all the private developers, there is room for engaging with the government and the local authorities in terms of having these conversations in terms of the benefit of larger homes in the long run, and how these can save money from the social care budget later on in life.
Thank you, Daniela. Julia, you have to, as an architect, you design the homes. You're the one who kind of starts with the vision, the idea, and draws something that people will want to live in. How do you go about deciding what would be a good home for older people to live in? I mean, not necessarily specialist retirement housing, although there is clearly a role for that, but just in the general population, building new homes, how can you ensure that they are proofed so that as people become older, they live well in those homes?
It's a paradox in housing, actually. I've been a housing architect for 30 years, but I have never had the privilege of designing a home for a specific household or individual. We have to design generically because we don't know who will end up living in any individual home that we build, and that's deeply frustrating in many ways because we know how personal home is to us. So the best we can do as architects is use our skills about the attributes that most people value, make sure we get the most out of every site, that rooms are well proportioned, the layout is logical and functional, and then beyond that, sort of exploit every little extra that the particular context allows us to do. So where the sun comes in, or the access to the garden, we build in these more individual touches, but still without knowing who's going to live there. But I mean, having said that, given that homes need to last 200 years, we can't afford to design for a single household. We have to be sensible about its longevity. So
Julia, I mean, that must mean that if we're smart about this, we have to be designing homes that are much more flexible and adaptable than the homes that we're designing now. One of our questioners has said, as people, many people are living with dementia in the community and need different kinds of internal space. Would our lives be easier if we had Japanese style sliding screens rather than fixed walls?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I was reminded the other day that I don't know whether you remember the lovely co-housing scheme in North Barnet that caused such a stir, the Older Women's Co-housing project. I think I'm right in saying, we weren't the architects, but I think I'm right in saying that the living space was designed to be open plan, but the residents were given the option to have a sliding door to allow them to separate the space, and that they had to pay the extra cost. They all chose to do that. They all value that flexibility to get the door right out the way, or close it up halfway, or close it up the full way. And that's sort of, life-changing in an everyday sort of way, but incredibly valuable. And I'm sure they all use that flexibility and enjoy it in different times of day and different activities. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. We have to offer people more choice at the beginning. A lot of our housing is pretty much the same as anywhere else. We're not, particularly private housing, I think. But more than that, we need to build in flexibility and ideally make those ideas available to future purchasers or renters. Because when we design a home, as you can imagine, we go through lots and lots of options, and then we have to sort of decide which one we think is best. The other options often work equally well, and I'm quite sure that some purchasers or renters would choose one of the other options we've looked at but discarded. So I think there'd be huge value in capturing some of the better alternatives and possibly enshrining them in title deeds, for example, so that future future occupants, as I say, know what's possible, particularly if we're smart about how we facilitate the change from one to the other.
So Daniela, let me ask you this. If we are to be designing new apartment blocks, and in many of our major cities, that's what we will be doing, should it be mandatory that they have balconies? Should that be something that is written into the planning consent, for example? And perhaps you might also want to talk a little bit about how we ensure digital connectivity. Have we reached the point where new homes should be built in a way where digital connectivity is as easy to access as electrical connectivity is in all the new homes that we build now?
Yes, so yes, private outdoor space should be a must, and each apartment should have some private outdoor space, but also it's about the size of the outdoor space. It's not good to have a Juliet balcony or a very small balcony that actually you're not able to sit in. So, for example, in our Merton regeneration, we are specifying that all balconies should be at least 1.5 meter width, so that there is room to actually sit outside. And a lot of planning local authorities have those requirements already, but it should be, should be a national requirement. And sorry, the other point of your question was about the
digital connectivity.
Yeah, this digital connectivity, yes, it should be a must. So, for example, we specify that all our homes should have fiber connections going forward, and we find this can be provided at not much additional cost if you set it out in your specification from the outset. There is some companies out there that they provide the fiber optic at very low cost, and then give connectivity for the first 3 months for residents coming into the apartments, and then residents can decide whether to stay with that company or change providers. So it's something that is happening in all our developments now, and I think should be a standard going forward in all new build.
Okay, thank you. Mike, is it, well, first of all, is modular housing an answer to apartment blocks? Can you do 6 or 8 stories, and can you put balconies on those in constrained spaces? But secondly, is there anything that you can do or that you would like to do that expands our ideas of what is possible? Because one of the big flaws that we've had for decades in our country is that we build the same kinds of houses over and over and over again. So no one has much idea of what good might look like, given a bit more flexibility. Let's be a bit visionary, Mike. What would you like to do?
Dealing with the first question first on apartments. I mean, I think modular construction is absolutely ideal for apartments. Lots of repeatability, lots of different ways of doing it, and there is a scheme, not one of ours, but in Croydon, which I think is the tallest, high-rise modular building. So I think it's a great solution for apartments. In terms of the second question, what would I like to see? Well, the first part of that question is around kind of thinking outside the box, I guess, and challenging some of the things that we do at the moment and not repeating it. And I don't think we spend enough time looking at that because we're also, nose to the grindstone, really trying to deliver now. So again, as an industry, I think we need greater collaboration, and we need some real innovation around what we could do. And we need to spend time doing that and money doing that, and really looking at it from and involving lots and lots of different people in that, from customers to architects, engineers. And I'd like to see that there's some of that goes on at the moment across modular manufacturers. We're involved in a number of sort of government-sponsored schemes by Innovate UK to look and start questioning some of these things. In terms of what I would like to see, I can't really sort of quantify that in terms of a physical house. What I'd like to see is that we talk about it, we put some money into it, we resource it, and work out how we can create real innovation in everything that we do to create different housing and different ways of designing it, different ways of building it. And I think that's the first step. So that's what I'd like to see, more of that, more innovation, more investment into thinking differently. Okay.
Julia, one of our questioners has asked whether it would be helpful to include occupational therapists as one part of the design team, if you like, you know, bringing a kind of level of expertise about the way in which people actually use their homes. Now, there is a challenge here when you're designing homes that need to last 200 years, but in a way, perhaps that makes it even more important that we think even more carefully about the long life of the home, the different people at different stages of their lives who are going to be using it, and the kind of flexibility and adaptability that we need. So, you know, should we get people with that kind of expertise to be commenting on the new homes that are about to be built?
I think that's a good idea. I mean, the contact I've had with occupational therapists to date has been very specific to a particular person's needs, but they obviously have accumulated knowledge through all the people they deal with that would be very valuable to us, I think.
And what do you think we can do to, maybe I'm expressing too strong an opinion here, but to break the kind of, the thing that I've found very frustrating for years and years and years is that in most parts of the economy, manufacturers and suppliers are always looking for something new to offer, something better, shinier, more efficient, more effective. I mean, if you think what cars were like 50 years ago and what they're like now, they're just utterly transformed. If you think about how we listened to music 50 years ago and how we do so now, utterly transformed. Whereas the volume developers seem to want to tell us all the time that what we want is what we've always had and we will never want anything different. Yeah. How do we break that mindset?
Well, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because it's so ingrained, and it's just potty that their biggest competition, well, apart from competing with each other, is second-hand homes. I mean, yeah. Who wants a second-hand phone or a second-hand car or a second-hand Hoover? But people want second-hand homes, and you have to. I just don't know why they're not asking themselves why that is. I mean, it just makes no sense that a newer home wouldn't be more desirable. I think there's a kind of, well, there's a laziness, I think. I think there's almost a sort of informal cartel about not overstepping the boundaries because we'll disadvantage each other. It's a weird kind of setup, I think. And of course, you know, as architects, we would love to be more involved, but as you'll know, most private developers don't actually use architects. If they do, they're in-house architects. Yeah. So it's very difficult for us to have an input. But we absolutely love it when we do. And I had some great discussions with private developers during the Housing Standards Review, and individually they're fantastic. And I think keen to do more and keen to do better. Somehow there's this herd mentality that some informally decides to maintain the status quo, and we've got to break that. But I think maybe that will happen through the need to hit zero carbon. I don't think they're going to get there on their own. I think they're going to need architects because it needs input right at the start. You know, you need to think about orientation, layout, building form. If you stand any chance of getting zero carbon in the end, and you have to maintain rigor throughout the process, right down to the letterbox, which, you know, mustn't let in too much draft or you lose your airtightness. So I'm hoping that's going to give rise to many more developers realizing that they need our skills.
Yeah. So
and then we can offer them skills they didn't know they needed, but they do as well.
Just before I come on to the next question, I just want to comment that one or two questioners have said new homes are important, but it's our existing homes that we need to think about most. I can tell you that the Centre for Ageing Better absolutely agrees with that and has a substantive programme of work about our existing homes, about which you will be hearing more in the very short term. But we also have a programme of work which is specifically about new homes. And that's why the focus of this webinar has been about new homes. And having said that, one of the questions that we got in advance was from Joan Rutherford, who I think is in Manchester, about accessibility. The Centre for Ageing Better has an ambition that a half of all new homes should be built to full accessibility standards. I want to ask all three of you, if it was up to you, what would you make not optional, but mandatory? You know, is part M of the building regs, should we make that mandatory? Is zero carbon, should we make that mandatory? Should we say things about the amount of space per person or the amount of light that gets in? So we will all inevitably be negotiating what is possible within the context of the specific site and the needs of the local community and what planners want. But what do we think should be absolutely bottom line? You must do this. I think I'll start with Daniela on that.
Obviously, I am increasing space standards is, one of the things I believe we should do. Whether to make it mandatory or not, it's I'm a bit unsure about, and because it goes back to viability, is how do we pay for it all? And obviously, we are going towards the greatest recession we've seen in generations, and how we will be able to build larger homes at a cost. So that is my worry, whether I'm a bit unsure whether it should be mandatory. But obviously, as you said, for example, the idea of 50% of homes should be to wheelchair standards. That should be it, because only that way you ensure there is longevity of that home to last 200 years and be used by different people at different stages of their lives. What I think is now become a must after the pandemic is the fact that people should be able to work from home and have some space. So that probably should be mandatory, a space where you can fit a decent sized desk with all the plugs, so you have a home office space, even if it's not a dedicated room, but actually a place where you can sit and close the door and concentrate on your work, because we will be working from home a lot more.
Is that a nice to have, or should it be
that should
a requirement? It should be a must. Okay.
So as it was in the old HQIs, but a bigger space than the HQIs, because that was quite tiny.
Yeah. Okay, Mike, what would you make mandatory?
All of those things. I think it's vital, and again, it's this level playing field, and it's about the conversation we've just had as to why house builders are not doing it, because the market's so commercially driven. There isn't enough land. That any type of new regulation, house builders see it as a cost and not a benefit or a value, and try and resist it, because it's so it's all about volume, it's all about delivery, and it's also about viability, as Daniela just mentioned. So if we introduce those standards and they're mandatory for everybody, then projects will become viable, because the cost of land will have to come down. At the moment, there's not enough land. It's competitively fought over in good markets and bad markets. And that's continually forcing the cost of housing up, and therefore a challenge around delivering some of these standards. So I think if there's a level playing field on achieving all of these standards, collaboration across the industry, and that these things become mandatory, then actually they do become viable, because if it costs more, then you can't pay as much for the land.
I think that's a really important point. We're 56 minutes into this webinar, and it's the first time we've mentioned land. But I must say, I agree, Mike, that if we were in an environment where these things were requirements, it wouldn't actually affect the overall cost of the development. What it would do is reduce the premium paid to landowners, yes, because that's where the slack is in the system. So rather than huge unearned profits going to landowners, we would actually get better quality and potentially more affordable homes. So that may be one thing that we'd like to think further about. And we are very nearly at the end of our time. Julia, I've not yet asked you what you would make mandatory.
Well, I've got a similar list, actually. I would make the safe space standard mandatory. I would make category 2 the minimum standard for accessibility now. I wouldn't leave it till 2030 or 2050. Zero carbon, some open space, private open space for every dwelling, and daylight. Of that list, I think the Prime Minister is promising us daylight now to habitable rooms as of yesterday, which seems quite astonishing that that's necessary in the 21st century, but let's not belittle it. I absolutely agree that the cost will come out of land value, and I think it just makes no sense to do anything less than that. And again, during the Housing Standards Review, many of the developers said, tell us what you want, and we'll do it within reason, but we'll do it. But we've all got to have to do it. Put it in regulation. And they were talking to the government, much as now it was in deregulatory mode, and they simply couldn't digest what they were hearing and act upon it. They were focused on getting rid of rules. And there were the developers saying, actually, we don't mind. Just make it simple.
Yeah. So I think one of the lessons that we've learned, although we keep seeming to forget, is that if you make things compulsory for a while, we then stop thinking of them at all, because it's so obvious. You know, you wouldn't get in your car to drive it and not put your seatbelt on. But we had to make that compulsory for it to be standard. And I think there are a number of things in this environment where we need to follow the same route. Developers who say that there is no local need for more accessible homes, that is such a reductive way to approach the question, because if we are building new homes that are going to last 200 years, and surely the developers would be supporting that, then they need to ensure that homes are accessible for everyone. And as I must have said a million times in my life, if you can get a wheelchair through the door, you can also get a double buggy through the door, which makes it more accessible for everyone. So I just want to tell you before we stop that Rachel Wooden, who is an OT, has said, we are also working across all developments to ensure we provide inclusive and accessible homes. Skilled housing OTs are incredibly well placed to help. So I think that's a very useful offer. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we have run out of time. I think this has been a very rich and rewarding conversation. And I think the quality of the 51 questions, as well as the ones that I got in advance, and the number of comments that have come on the chat line, have been fantastic. We will take all of that away. And some of the questions imply ideas that I think we will need to think further about. This whole webinar will be available on the Centre for Ageing Better's YouTube challenge. And if post hoc you have any further thoughts or observations and you want to use Twitter, remember the hashtag Road to Recovery. But for now, a huge thank you to Mike, Daniela, and to Julia, and to my colleagues at the Centre for Ageing Better for organising and managing all of this. I hope you've all found that useful, and thank you very much, and goodbye, everyone.